There's been a pro-offshore wind bill that was presented by Senator Lawrence, and that bill increased the offshore wind goals for the state of Maine by quite a lot. And that bill has had so many moving parts, and NEFSA was strongly opposed to that bill. We came here to show our presence and try to influence some of the people that would be voting.
I'm the Climate and Clean Energy Director at the Natural Resources Council of Maine, and I'm here today on behalf of our 25,000 members and supporters to testify in strong support of LD 1895. Floating offshore wind development in the Gulf goes way beyond energy and climate. It's one of the biggest economic development opportunities the state will see in a generation or more.
There are many benefits offshore wind will bring to Maine, both environmentally and economically.
We have this tremendous opportunity, a stunning opportunity. And I strongly believe in every bone in my body that we can build out this industry in a way that works for fisheries and in a way that builds a new economy for the future.
We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to bring the economic benefits of offshore wind development to Maine people, and passing LD 1895 will help to assure that we maximize its benefits to Maine, working waterfronts with services and businesses that support offshore wind operations are emerging to take advantage of the economic opportunities presented by offshore wind. They can be built here.
I haven't found a fisherman yet that's pro-wind. This offshore effects are going to destroy our heritage, destroy our food resources here in the United States. And we're talking about displacing at least 200,000 jobs up and down the New England seaboard. Nobody should be allowed to industrialize an ocean. Not nobody.
The Gulf of Maine is one of the most productive marine ecosystems in the world and should not be used as a testing ground for new floating offshore wind technology and large industrial wind farms.
We're excited. Offshore wind is a massive opportunity for economic growth. The East Coast is like the Saudi Arabia of wind, and honestly, there's no finer resource than the Gulf of Maine. Floating offshore is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to advance science pioneered in Maine.
It is irresponsible and dangerous to consider siting windmills before studies are done. This is the current course we are on.
We are in support of LD 1895. Together, we will give a little to make Maine's energy goals a reality and still protect the heritage fishery that has served our state and been its identity for generations.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for providing a more nuanced view of the lobster fisheries, view of this bill and offshore wind.
We've been told that we need to move quickly given the governor's ambitious goals. I've heard this over and over again from many people in the legislature and the bureaucracy and the special interest groups and the high-paid lobbyists working for foreign corporations. Where did these goals come from, and why are we using these goals as a target?
This is something that gives certainty to project developers like ourselves and increases the bankability of a particular geography. In bringing offshore wind to the Gulf of Maine, the goal here is mandated minimum procurement targets, but no maximum. We've seen this lead to a sustained level of interest from the development community and other markets around the world.
But how can we trust a government that is in the process of dismantling the lobster industry to save endangered right whales, while at the same time approving construction of wind farms in Massachusetts in the same area where hundreds of these whales are found?
Floating wind turbines, do they kill whales? No, they don't. Okay? They don't kill whales. The scientists have said that. They don't kill the whales.
Questions from the committee?
And other things.
LD 1895 must become law this session. As our state's climate action plan so aptly states, Maine won't wait. To achieve a just transition to Maine-made offshore wind, we need all voices at the table. LD 1895 reflects those voices. For this reason, Maine conservation voters, the dozens of organizations comprising the Environmental Priorities Coalition, and almost 450 people who have signed the attached petition all encourage you to vote ought to pass.
This bill puts Maine in a strong position in the development of offshore wind in the Gulf of Maine. The diversity, equity, and inclusion requirements and the stakeholder engagement central to this bill are important to us at Maine Climate Action Now.
I'm the Director of Energy Research at the Union of Concerned Scientists in our Climate and Energy program. I offer this testimony in support of the sponsor's amendment to LD 1895. Maine will capitalize on the falling costs of offshore wind and federal incentives that are available. We need to move forward in this time frame that's being offered in the bill.
As every inch of the Gulf of Maine is put up for lease to offshore wind companies and to foreign governments, currently they already have this test site that's going to move forward. and this gives them an opportunity to study it. I mean, unfortunately, I don't think there's been enough money set aside to do the amount of research that's needed, and I think that's a huge problem. We're relying on this project to inform us on the pros and cons of offshore wind and how it's going to coexist, if possible, with the marine environments, with the habitat, and with the fishermen as well. But despite that, the state is moving forward with increased offshore wind goals, without even waiting to see how this project turns out. I mean, that's a huge problem. You're putting the cart before the horse here.
So, Senator, those of us who've been here and have worked through the research array might wonder why this now, where we don't actually have any hard information from some of that to lean on as we consider this.
The simple answer is if we were to wait, we would miss the window of opportunity to do floating offshore wind. The purpose of this bill is to start this project early, recognizing we're 5, maybe even 10 years away from ever seeing electricity from a project like this. But unless we start now, if we wait till the research array is done, we're going to be 5 and 10 years away from there.
You're not even given the chance for the research project to do what it's intended to do, research. We need to give enough time to gather important information.
We know that Maine has an opportunity to be a national leader in offshore wind generation. Governor Mills' Climate Action Plan's tagline is Maine won't wait. The takeaway here is simple. We must not only not wait, we must act now. 1895 provides the roadmap.
We need to know what's going to happen here. Once they're there, it's too late. That's irrevocable, irreversible harm that's already been created once they're put there. It's not something you can just easily backtrack on. This is a huge deal. We need to do this right.
When we're designing our hulls, we're designing them for 100-year life instead of 20 or 30-year life. So every, hopefully 20 or 30 years, you can throw it back to shore and repower, put a new turbine on and send it back out. A procurement bill such as LD 1895 is urgently needed to pass this session to keep Maine relevant in the growing U.S. and global offshore wind industry. We got to build the port. And if somebody else gets ahead of us, Massachusetts, and goes build the port first, guess what? Everything's going to happen in Massachusetts. We've been at it for 15 years. Okay, 15 years. And the first bill that was passed more than 10 years ago was passed unanimously by Republicans and Democrats and independents to move this technology forward. I think we can do it again. And I hope we do it again today.
My name is Dustin Delano. I'm the COO for the New England Fishermen's Stewardship Association and also a commercial lobster fisherman of over 20 years. The committee's been sitting there all day. They've been listening to all kinds of testimony, very little testimony in opposition. I saw the Senate chair sitting there and scrolling on his phone. And I said his name. I said, Senator Lawrence. I said, if you vote in favor of this bill, anybody on this committee, if you vote in favor of this bill, I want to personally invite you to come into our coastal communities, to come into the schools and look our children in the eyes and tell them you just ripped the future out from underneath them. There's so many kids. This is the same school where I grew up in, where we'd come to school the next day and we'd talk about what we caught in our lobster traps the day before, where we all knew that we were going to be fishermen just like the generations before us. And when I was 10 years old, I could say for sure that I was going to be a fisherman. Like we weren't worried about ocean industrialization. We weren't worried about radical environmental groups coming after us over an endangered species that we're not interacting with. We didn't have those types of worries, and that's a huge problem now. Parents are telling their kids, don't even plan on being a fisherman because that's probably not going to exist when these environmental groups get done with us or when the government gets done with us. We need to stand up against offshore wind. We need to stand up against industrializing our oceans, but we also need to stand up for better data. Our fisheries are being regulated based off of a lot of data that it's just not complete. And NEFSA is at the table to help with the major issues.